It wasn't intuition. It wasn't paranoia. It was that quiet, chilling certainty you feel when something has already been decided without you. The meeting with my father, Calvin Moore, and my sister, Brielle, had ended too smoothly. No tension. No resistance. Just polite nods and vague reassurance that somehow made my stomach knot. So instead of going home, I went downstairs. The secure records wing of Northway Growth Systems sat beneath the main offices, keycard access, motion sensors, rows of locked cabinets I hadn't needed to touch in years. I helped design half the operational protocols in this building. I knew exactly where not to look. And that's why I knew exactly where to look. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment like this. Your like and share can carry this story to someone who needs hope, healing, or strength today. Red heart. The folder was hidden in a back drawer, wedged between compliance audits and expired licensing files. Black. Unmarked. No project code. My hands didn't shake until I opened it. Because it wasn't a draft. It wasn't a proposal. It was finalized. Signed. Notarized. A legal authorization transferring executive credential authority, digital identity control, and regulatory sign-off privileges, my privileges, to Brielle Moore, effective immediately. Chief Executive Authorization. Full platform access. Sole decision rights. My name appeared once. As the former credential holder. 9 years. 9 years of my life, reduced to a footnote. I sat on the floor of the archive room, back against cold metal, trying to breathe through something that didn't make logical sense. Because for nearly a decade, I hadn't just worked here. I had been the successor. My name is Lena Carter. I'm 33 years old. And for 9 years, I ran strategy and operations at Northway Growth Systems. That title sounds impressive, but what it really meant was simple: when something worked, I built it. When something failed, I fixed it. When something scaled, I stayed awake making sure it didn't collapse under its own weight. I built the company's behavioral analytics engine from scratch, the one that tracked consumer movement patterns and optimized ad spend in real time. The one that turned inconsistent growth into stable profit. The one that tripled enterprise retention in under 4 years. I missed my best friend's wedding. I remember sitting in my car outside the venue, dress folded on the passenger seat, laptop balanced on my knees while I walked a client through an emergency forecast call, because my father had double-booked himself and forgot. I closed the deal. I missed the vows. That became my normal. My 20s disappeared into apology texts and calendar reminders. I didn't date. I didn't travel. I didn't stop. I told myself it was temporary. Because my father promised me something. One day, Calvin would say after a strong quarter, resting his hand on my shoulder like a benediction, "This will all be yours. You're the only one who understands it." I believed him. That promise became my fuel. My excuse. My identity. People ask why I stayed so long. Why I tolerated the hours, the pressure, the invisibility. It wasn't loyalty. It was a trap. When you're the competent one, the one who keeps everything from falling apart, you stop being seen as a person. You become infrastructure. A load-bearing wall. Necessary, but never admired. You convince yourself that sacrifice is noble. That endurance equals worth. That someday, all of it will be acknowledged. And the people benefiting from that belief will never correct you. Because correcting you would cost them comfort. I wasn't just working for a company. I was working for a man who called me his daughter while quietly preparing paperwork to erase me. Then Brielle came home. She hadn't been around in years. She bounced between cities, Barcelona, Miami, New York, documenting her life online, cultivating an audience my father found endlessly fascinating. She was 30. Effortlessly charming. Beautiful in a way that didn't require explanation. I, meanwhile, had spreadsheets. Within days of her return, Calvin called a company-wide meeting. He announced Brielle as the new CEO. Effective immediately. She brings vision, he said. A modern voice. Something fresh. What Brielle brought were aesthetics. She changed fonts. Redesigned the break room. Spent hours debating brand colors. She posted smiling photos from the conference room with captions about leadership and legacy, then left by 4:30 every afternoon. My strategic models, the ones I'd spent months refining, were suddenly too restrictive. My forecasts were dismissed as limiting creativity. I watched my father, a man who built everything on numbers, abandon them for enthusiasm. It wasn't blindness. It was choice. Families like ours run on unspoken roles. The golden child. The dependable one. The dreamer. The worker. I was the workhorse. Brielle was the symbol. My father needed her to be brilliant, because if she was, then ignoring my competence could be justified. And he needed me to stay reliable, because reliability doesn't demand applause. I was expected to keep the engine running while she held the steering wheel. Then I remembered Project Meridian. A $8.4 million renewal for our most demanding enterprise client. My client. I had spent 7 months building the strategy, pure data, predictive modeling, behavioral segmentation. The pitch had been finished for weeks. But Calvin kept delaying. They're not ready, he said. Now I knew the truth. They weren't waiting for the client. They were waiting for Brielle. I logged into the internal server. There it was. My deck. My models. My projections. Only the title slide had changed. Presented by Brielle Moore, CEO. Something inside me went quiet. Not anger. Not sadness. Belief. I closed the folder. Returned the badge. Walked past the front desk without stopping. At 10:41 p.m., I opened my laptop. Subject, resignation. 2 sentences. No explanations. I hit send. Then I turned off my phone. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt honest. The first 3 days after I resigned felt unreal. Not peaceful. Not panicked. Just suspended, like my life was holding its breath. I slept late for the first time in years. I made coffee without checking email. I took a walk at noon, just because the sun was out and no calendar alert told me not to. When I finally turned my phone back on, it detonated. Missed calls stacked like dominoes. Voicemails from numbers I hadn't saved anymore. Messages layered with urgency, accusation, confusion. My mother's voice cracked through the speaker first. Lena, please. You're tearing this family apart. Your father didn't mean, just call us back. I deleted it. Brielle's text came next. You are being unbelievably dramatic. This is not a betrayal. Dad just trusted me with leadership. You're acting like a child. I blocked her number without replying. From my father, nothing. Of course not. Calvin Moore didn't chase. He waited. He believed gravity always pulled me back. He was wrong. On the fourth day, my phone rang again. A number I recognized immediately. Marcia Lynn, head of people operations. I answered. Thank God, she said before I could speak. I was starting to think you'd vanished. I'm still here, I said calmly. Just not employed. She exhaled. I shouldn't be telling you this, but I can't watch this happen without saying something. They're moving forward with Project Meridian. I already knew. This Friday, she continued. Brielle's presenting it as her flagship initiative. I closed my eyes. Does she understand the data? Marcia asked quietly. No, I said. She understands the slides. There was a pause. Papers shuffled on her end. She's been asking the analysts to simplify things. Remove the deeper modeling. She thinks the $8.4 million budget is flexible, more like a suggestion. I pictured it perfectly. Lena, Marcia said carefully, this is going to collapse. The client, Eleanor Weiss, she's not forgiving. She built her company on numbers. She notices everything. Eleanor. 6 months earlier, she'd asked for a private strategy lunch. Off the books. No executives. No show. I remembered sitting across from her in a quiet restaurant, pulling up my preliminary models on my tablet. I hadn't meant to go that deep, but she kept asking the right questions. At one point, she'd leaned back and said, "This is the first time someone's shown me thinking instead of decoration." She knew. She knew who built Meridian. Marcia, I said finally, I'm not going to interfere. What? Her voice sharpened. You're just going to let this happen? Yes. You could stop this. I know. There was a long silence. Then I said the only honest thing left. She wanted the authority. Let her carry the weight. I ended the call. I didn't set a trap. I didn't need to. They had already built one, and Brielle was about to walk straight into it wearing confidence like armor. Friday came quietly. I wasn't in a boardroom. I was in my apartment, folding sweaters into a cardboard box. Packing without urgency. Choosing what to keep. Letting go of things that no longer fit. In my head, the meeting played out with brutal clarity. Brielle would walk in smiling. Perfect posture. Designer outfit. She'd greet everyone by first name, radiating assurance. She wouldn't present Meridian. She'd perform it. My data would glow on the screen, rebranded, recolored, stripped of its depth. She'd talk about momentum. Brand emotion. Market vibes. She'd glide past the algorithms. Treat the forecasting logic like an inconvenience between visuals. Because she didn't understand that for Eleanor Weiss, the data was the beauty. I imagined Eleanor sitting still at the end of the table. Listening. Waiting. Then the question. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Precise. Can you walk me through slide 39 again? Eleanor would ask. Your consumer acquisition curve doesn't align with the revised spend allocation. Which dataset justified the shift? And that's when the room would change. Because Brielle wouldn't have an answer. She might laugh. Deflect. Talk about holistic impact. But Eleanor wouldn't be listening anymore. She would be watching. The phone rang while I was taping a box shut. I looked at the screen. Eleanor Weiss. I answered. Lena, she said. Her voice was calm. Controlled. That was memorable. I stayed silent. Your sister's presentation, she continued, was visually engaging. But she couldn't explain a single underlying model. Still silent. We're withdrawing from Project Meridian, she said. Effective immediately. I sat on the floor. I'm only calling you, Eleanor added, because I want to be clear. We will not work with Northway Growth Systems unless you are the one leading the account. The line went dead. An hour later, my phone rang again. Calvin Moore. I answered. What did you do? He shouted. His voice was raw, frantic in a way I'd never heard. I didn't do anything, I said evenly. They pulled the contract. $8.4 million. You have to come back. You have to fix this. I waited until his breathing slowed. I'm not the executive authority anymore, I said. Brielle is. A pause. Then fury. You're being vindictive. No, I replied. I'm being consistent. I hung up. The calls came fast after that. My mother. My sister. Numbers I didn't recognize. I blocked them all. A week passed. Through Marcia, I heard what I expected. 2 senior analysts resigned. Clients demanded reassurances no one could give. The company's compliance partners flagged credential irregularities because Brielle didn't actually have authorization to sign half the documents she'd been approving. The misuse was visible now. Authority without understanding always leaves fingerprints. On the 8th day, an email arrived in my personal inbox. From my father. 3 words. What do you want? I didn't respond. I forwarded it to my attorney. Her reply to him was simple. Legal meeting. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. When I walked into that conference room, Calvin looked older. Smaller. Angela, no, Brielle, wasn't there. He knew she couldn't be. Lena, he started. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. These are the terms. The room smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. I noticed that first, how ordinary everything felt, because for most of my life, moments like this had lived in my imagination as dramatic, cinematic things. Raised voices. Apologies. Maybe tears. There were none. My father sat across from me, shoulders slumped, hands folded together as if he were trying to hold himself upright. His lawyer flipped through the document I'd placed on the table, already knowing what he'd find. Brielle wasn't there. She couldn't be. Calvin cleared his throat. You're asking for half the company. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence do what it does best. Yes, I said finally. 51% voting equity. Chief Operations Authority effective immediately. Full oversight of all data, strategy, and compliance functions. His lawyer stopped turning pages. And Brielle? Calvin asked. She steps down from executive authority, I replied. She keeps a non-decision creative role. No client contact. No access to financial approvals. No signing power. That's humiliating, he snapped. No, I said quietly. That's appropriate. The lawyer leaned back, rubbing his temples. Calvin, he said, you don't have leverage here. My father looked at him sharply. The Meridian fallout triggered an audit, the lawyer continued. Credential misuse. Approval irregularities. 2 more clients are reviewing their contracts. If Lena doesn't return, you're looking at insolvency within 60 days. I watched my father absorb that. This man had built his identity on being right. On being the smartest person in every room. Now he wasn't even the most prepared. He looked at me again. You planned this. I shook my head. No. I stepped out of the way. There was a difference. Planning requires intent to harm. Stepping aside only requires refusing to carry someone else's weight. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse out of pride alone. Then his shoulders sagged. Agreed, he said. Just like that. No apology. No acknowledgement of the years he'd taken from me. No recognition of the promise he'd broken. Only survival. The papers were signed by noon. When I walked back into Northway Growth Systems the following Monday, no one clapped. No one whispered. No one congratulated me. They just exhaled. That's how you know who was actually holding the place together. I didn't take my father's corner office. I took the one I'd always worked from, just stripped of the glass ceiling I'd been pressing against for a decade. My first move wasn't revenge. It was triage. I reinstated the data review protocols Brielle had dismantled. I restored access permissions. I called the analysts who'd quit and told them the truth, no spin, no promises I couldn't keep. 2 came back within hours. One said, I didn't leave because of the work. I left because no one listened anymore. By the end of the week, the hemorrhaging slowed. Then I made the call that mattered. Eleanor, I said when she answered. It's Lena Moore. I heard the smile in her pause. I was hoping you'd call. There's been a change in governance, I said. I now hold controlling operational authority. That changes the conversation, she replied. I'm sending you the Meridian proposal, I said, pulling up the original files. Not the one you saw. The real one. Good, Eleanor said. I'll review it tonight. We signed a revised contract 3 days later. Smaller budget. Stricter oversight. Earned trust always costs more than assumed loyalty. As for Brielle, we didn't have a blow-up. There was no screaming match. No dramatic confrontation in a hallway. She didn't speak to me for weeks. When she finally did, it was a single sentence, flat and stunned. I didn't know it was that complicated. I nodded. That's the point. She left the company 6 months later. Not in disgrace. Not in triumph. Just elsewhere. My father and I never returned to what we were before. Some things don't mend. They just settle into a new shape. He stopped promising. I stopped believing. And strangely, that was healthier. I learned something in the quiet aftermath, something no promotion, no title, no apology could have taught me. People don't value your contribution while you're cushioning their fall. They value it when it's gone. I spent years thinking my worth came from being indispensable. From being needed. From being the one who never dropped the ball. But necessity is a trap. It teaches people that you'll always be there, even when they step on you to climb higher. The moment I stopped holding everything together, the truth surfaced. Not about them. About me. My value wasn't something my family could assign or revoke. It wasn't a title they could pass to someone flashier. It wasn't loyalty, or sacrifice, or how much pain I could endure quietly. It was competence. It was clarity. It was knowing when to walk away, and when to come back on my own terms. They say you can't choose your family. Maybe that's true. But you can choose the role you play in their lives. You can refuse to be the silent foundation everyone stands on while they decorate the top floor. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do isn't proving your worth. It's letting the people who underestimated you feel what the world looks like without your support. That's not revenge. That's self-respect.